Westworld Season 2 talks big talk about, deep philosophical meaning.
Oh, fucking Plutarch. Quote some William Blake over your Radiohead and your Kanye covers.
Human nature and free will and control. And bring up God every second scene and have all these, biblical Eden references and, a Jesus reference every 5 minutes. Put a bit of Escher in there in the background. That'll make us look smart. And this excruciatingly twisted timeline where we're constantly being denied basic information to orient ourselves in this story. And the plot intricacies, what are the characters' motivations? What do they want? What is their plan? What's Ghost Nation? What's Ford's plan? What is Dolores trying to achieve? It's all meant to be in service of some purpose. The implicit promise of the story is that these things will add up to something. There will be some coherent meaning behind all this talk and bloodshed. So, is there? After the season finale, does the plot make sense? Do the characters have coherent motivations? And is there some kind of meaning, some payoff to these grand themes of free will and control? Let's look at the past season and see if it makes sense. So the season starts with this vision of Dolores creating Bernard. At first, we don't know who it is. We're this looks like earlier scenes from season 1 of Arnold speaking with Dolores, guiding her to consciousness, but this seems different. It's got the weird aspect ratio with the bars above and below, which represents that this is happening in the cradle. So yes, this is Dolores creating Bernard. But Bernard describes this weird dream that he had about being on an ocean with others on a distant shore. He's been left behind by Dolores, and waters are rising around him. So this seems to be a reference to what happens in the future when Dolores causes the flooding of the valley and waters rise from below, with Bernard standing in the valley. That is what this is in reference to. But how did Bernard in the cradle years ago know that in the future this valley would flood? How could he possibly predict that? I mean, if this Bernard is a copy of Arnold, or is based off Dolores' memories of Arnold, maybe Arnold had this dream originally, and Bernard is repeating what Arnold saw. But how did Arnold 35 years ago see this future event with the flood? It makes no sense. That said, the waters rising from below is a very cool and deliberate mirror to the waters seeping from above with Juliet's suicide in episode 9. It's a sort of a mirror reflection like James Delos was talking about with Logan. Above and below mirrors, water, reflection are all imagery, symbolism used in this season. So there is some nice vague meaning here, but there's no actual explanation for how Bernard in the past foresaw this future flood. And then there's time fuckery, and then Bernard wakes up on the beach. He's dazed and confused, he's unstuck in time like Billy Pilgrim, and there's this whole sequence which the theory crafters had field days with. Because there's this one moment where Bernard finishes one of Strand's sentences, and that strongly hints that something weird's going on. There's some loop, some simulation, because Strand is interrogating Bernard about the location of stuff, so it seems as though maybe Bernard has been trapped in a loop. There were some really cool theories about that. There are all these production errors, like a woman host gets shot twice, stuff's going on. But in the end, there was no explanation for any of that weirdness, and it seems that there was no loop, there was no simulation. This was just Bernard being confused on a beach, and he just inexplicably finished Strand's sentence for him. For no reason. Red herring. What? And then the humans open up a host's brain. They look inside their memory of this Ghost Nation host, and we see that Dolores, came and killed this Ghost Nation host and said, not all of us deserve to make it to the valley beyond. What does that mean? Because the valley beyond, we now know, is the location of the Forge, which is the facility that stores all the data recorded about human behavior in Westworld. The Forge also contains this place called the Sublime, which is this Edenic, paradisiacal Windows XP land for the hosts to frolic in. But that place is not part of Dolores' plan. She doesn't approve of the Sublime, so that must not be what she's referring to when she tells this Ghost Nation host that we don't all deserve to make it. But she also can't be referring to the Forge because she doesn't bring anyone there either, apart from Bernard, who sort of tags along. And maybe she's talking about bringing hosts to the real world because she brings some mind eggs out into the real world, but that's not the Valley Beyond. There's no context in which it makes sense for Dolores to be going around killing people saying you don't deserve to come to the Valley Beyond. She wasn't bringing anyone to the Valley Beyond. And I mean, even if she was, why does she hate Ghost Nation in particular? What did Ghost Nation do against her? And all Ghost Nation has done lately is gathered hosts together to help them. So why does Dolores have it in for Ghost Nation hosts? No explanation. And then we see Dolores hunting down human beings for sport. And this, remember, is the protagonist who we're meant to like. She has this extended anime supervillain speech where she's about to hang these humans and she's talking about the reckoning. So one of Dolores' justifications for what's happening here is that this is vengeance against the people who have harmed her. And presumably these humans are board members of Delos, so they are to some extent complicit in the oppression of the hosts, so maybe it's legitimate to kill them. But in Dolores' speech, she talks about how humans have a fundamental need to hurt and kill people. It's as though Dolores' justifications for this murder isn't the crimes of these individuals, it's the failure of the human species as a whole. And that's one of the premises of this show, is that humans are fundamentally bad and evil and irredeemable. And I don't think that's true. I don't think humans are that bad. But even if they are, Dolores surely only makes herself as bad if she tortures and kills innocents like this, right? So unless you're as bloodthirsty as Dolores says we all are, I don't think Dolores is a very relatable or sympathetic protagonist this season, and that's one of the problems with this story. And then we get this scene with William and the robot version of young Robert Ford, who tells William that in this game you must find the door. This game is meant for you. So William's quest this season is ostensibly to find the door, but at the end of the season we learn that the door is for the hosts to enter this place called the Sublime. It has nothing to do with William, so why did this robot tell him to go there? The robot says that in this game, you have to make it back out. So maybe what the door really represents is William escaping his loop of violence and awfulness and becoming a better person, and leaving the Westworld park physically. This is what Emily offers to William. She tries to get him out of the park. She tries to get him to tell the truth about Juliet's suicide. Emily tries to help William break out of his delusions. But we also know that Emily had some secret plan. She had that map with the Delos symbol connected to the Immortality Project. And after the credits, it's a host of Emily who's trapped William in this infinite hell loop of his own sins. So maybe it was Emily's plan to put William in that hell loop as punishment for what he did to her and her mother and others. And the thing is, the robot Robert says that the game begins where you end and ends where you began. He's describing a loop, like the loop William is stuck in at the end of the finale. So maybe this loop William's trapped in was a plan of Emily and Ford working together to put William in there as the ultimate test of whether he could become a decent person. But if that's the case, why is there no indication of it in the season? Why is there no conversation between Ford and Emily conspiring to put William in there? There's really no adequate explanation given for this scene about the door from the robot. Near the end of episode 1, there's this conversation between Dolores and Teddy where she says, "I remember, I see it all now so clearly. The past, the present, the future. I know how this story ends. It ends with you, Teddy, and me." And this is one of the most baffling conversations in the season. How does Dolores know the future? Throughout the season, she has had this self-assured thing of seeming like she has a plan, she knows what's going to happen. And yeah, there are those scenes where William shows Dolores the construction of the Forge, and the scenes where Arnold takes Dolores out into the real world. So she does know about the Forge, and she knows some things about the real world, but that's no reason to claim that she knows the future. And her claim that the story ends with Teddy and Dolores at the end, that just doesn't happen. Teddy gets left behind in the sublime Windows XP land while Dolores goes out into the real world. They separate, and surely that wasn't Dolores' plan because she changed her mind about Teddy towards the end. So this scene in episode 1 where she claims to know the future is just bullshit. It's just not true. So why is it in the show? The other dumb irony is that Dolores' whole plan is to go to the Forge and read those books of human data, human knowledge, so that she can go out and defeat the humans in the real world. So why is she acting like a know-it-all who remembers everything and has seen the future before she's gotten the knowledge, which is her entire plan? That makes no sense. It's so dumb. So episode 2 begins with Arnold and Dolores in the real world in the past, and honestly, this stuff's fucking beautiful, because we get to understand why Arnold loves the hosts. He compares them to his child Charlie, and the sort of like wonderment and like positivity and starry-eyedness that children have, and how hosts are the same, and it connects in a really personal way to Arnold's story, but also to like the possibility in a technological sense of the machines. So this is actually quite a beautiful scene. And then we get the stuff with Logan, where he's like being seduced into like investing in Westworld, and the way that the Westworld hosts Akichita and Angela just masterfully manipulate Logan suggests that they might have had some kind of intel on Logan that like informed that whole manipulation, that whole show that they perform. It's all kind of mysterious when you think about it, because like we're never given any plot explanation for why it might be the case that they know exactly how to manipulate Logan, but in any case, these are some fun scenes and I'm not going to shit on them. And then there's this conversation between William and Lawrence, where William is describing his regret over creating the Forge years ago. William started this immortality project, and now he's realized it's a bad idea for two reasons. Firstly, creating like these half-host immortal humans is a threat to human free will. If you decode the human mind and work out how it works, you reduce the mind into code. People aren't people anymore, they're things. In episode 4, William witnesses James Delos, this man he respected, being ground down into nothing, destroyed over and over and over. And I think that's why William eventually rejected the immortality project. He didn't want James Delos's fate to happen to him. So that's one of the reasons why William wants to burn down the Forge and prevent himself ending up in the hell loop that he does end up in the end. The other reason is that the Forge is evidence of William's evil, or the evil acts he's committed in the park. He speaks a lot here about judgment. He says that he wants to fight his way back and appeal the verdict. So like somehow like remove or rescind the evidence of his sins. So that's the point of William's goal to destroy the Forge. As Dolores says in the finale, William's goal is self-destruction. He wants to prevent his own immortality. He wants to ensure his own death, but in the end he doesn't get it. Weirdly, William also says in this scene that this whole enterprise is going down in flames and we'll all be dead soon enough, real dead. And that's not true either, because William's one of the few characters to survive, and you know, Lawrence as well might survive. He did get shot, but he could be rezzed just like any other host is over and over, so there doesn't seem to be any particular basis for William's claim that everyone's gonna die. Dolores starts her whole plot of recruiting the Confederado soldiers, and this really doesn't make much sense in context of her ultimate goal. Her ultimate goal is to reach the Forge and get the human knowledge inside it. Why did she need the Confederados? There is this human army that's approaching, so it seems as though she's using the Confederados to destroy the human army and the Confederados to prevent either of those groups being obstacles in her journey to get to glory. Surely it would be far safer and better serve her goals to just try and like sneak past the soldiers instead of engaging both in a giant bloodbath which could have easily killed Dolores. Bad plan. We get this pretty exciting scene where there's a confrontation between Dolores and Maeve. This seems to be setting up like these two ideological opposites who represent different philosophies. Dolores wants revenge, and she's willing to sacrifice her loved ones for the sake of her war for survival, whereas in contrast, Maeve isn't as interested in revenge, and she wants to protect her loved ones, and is willing to sacrifice herself to do so. So there's a really interesting contrast, but it's never really explored in the rest of the season. These characters don't meet again until like episode 7 or whatever, when they have this like one conversation where Dolores is like, I guess my philosophy's better, because you're dead and I'm not. And at the season finale, Dolores gives a speech about how, like, oh, well, you might judge me for being a genocidal maniac, but at least I'm not dead, like Maeve. Like, neither of these extremes are reasonable. Why isn't there a character in between Maeve and Dolores who finds a way to survive without murdering hundreds? Like, why
I guess that's Bernard.
We get this, like, mansion house party at the Delos family where William takes over and everything, and Logan gets high and says that the whole species is gonna burn because of what Delos is doing. Why is the whole species gonna burn? Like, maybe Logan has heard about the Delos Immortality Project and he has similar concerns to William about it, like, undermining free will and identity and stuff, but, like, it's a little bit hyperbolic to say that the whole species is gonna burn as a result of what Delos is doing. Basically, every character in this series is, like, super hyperbolic, saying, like, a question that no one has ever dared to ask, and it's gonna burn, and judgment, and God. It's like a fucking Doctor Who episode. Everything's like the biggest question in the universe of time. Like, enough with the superlatives. Haven't you heard of under promise, over deliver? We see Gus Fring with William in Las Mudas, and it's kind of cool to see, like, this post-apocalyptic, like, abandoned hostscape. Like, what happens in Disneyland when all the people leave? What does Mickey Mouse do? Like, that's what Gus Fring is in this moment. Is this abandoned prop who's just sitting in a wasteland of the end of his story. It's kind of a profound moment. And then we have this conversation with William about, like, elephants and steaks, which is a metaphor for William being, like, stuck in his loop, which, as it turns out, is sort of what his arc is about. William is trapped in, like, the person who he is. He's trying to break out of it, and the elephant metaphor is a nice summation of that. We also get, like, the voice of Robert through Gus Fring saying that, oh, you have to do this quest alone, even though, like, Lawrence tags along for most of it and stuff, so, like, that's another weird contradiction, but whatever. And then we get a flashback of young William with Dolores, showing her the construction of the forge. He says, I think there's an answer here to a question no one's ever even dreamed of asking, which is not true, mate. The Forge represents an attempt to make humans immortal by decoding the human mind based on observation of their behavior. That's not the most revolutionary idea. I think someone's probably asked it before. So again, hyperbole, mate. And then Dolores reveals that her plan is go to the Forge and get the data about humans that's inside there to use it to destroy humanity. She says that it's a weapon and I'll use it to destroy them, which is like, is knowledge of human beings a weapon? We never actually saw Dolores use her knowledge of humans. Like, after she goes to that library and she reads the books, like she picks up the Carl Strand book and the Charlotte Hale book, like, you're expecting her to go like, oh, you know, I'm gonna use some mental jujitsu to, like, undermine, like, Strand's psychology. I'm gonna use my knowledge of, like, this person's, like, subtleties in order to manipulate him. Nope. She just pops a cap in his dome. Like, how is that using her weapon of knowledge? We haven't seen her put into practice her central MacGuffin of her arc. So what was the point? And again, she was talking earlier about, I have seen everything, I remember everything, the past, the present, the future. So, like, this whole, like, knowledge weapon thing is so dumb. It feels like a retcon or something. Rajworld is pretty dazzling. It's colorful, it's different, it's refreshing, it's nice, and the whole colonial theme deepens the ideas of, like, oppression and freedom with hosts that's been percolating throughout the season. So Rajworld is pretty cool. Emily's, like, test to determine whether her lover is a host or not by shooting him is weird, because it really, like, confuses the whole gun situation, because, of course, this is on, like, a timeline that's shifted to shortly before the finale of season 1, so the guns don't kill people yet, but then, like, during the Rajworld stuff, it changes so that the guns do kill people. Like, that confused a lot of people unnecessarily. And I suppose the point was that it introduces, like, this idea, this paranoia of whether a person is a host or not, and that's something that William experiences throughout his arc, but it's sort of a weird disjointed addition. Ghost Nation turns up and tries to take Sizemore from Maeve, and this is also just fucking bizarre. Why does Ghost Nation want to capture a random human? We've established that the goal of Ghost Nation and Akichita is to gather the hosts together and take them to the door so that they can be safe in the Sublime. What do humans have to do with this? They also capture Stubbs, and Stubbs, we learn in the finale, finale is apparently a host, so like maybe Ghost Nation was planning to put Stubbs into the Sublime, which would be like hilarious, but like they also capture Emily, and it's pretty clear that Emily is human, at least at this time, so we get no explanation for why the Ghost Nation is capturing humans, and we don't ever get to see what happens to the humans they were carrying around. It's bizarre. The Sizemore situation also brings into question how Maeve's powers work, because Maeve tries to command this Ghost Nation host, but he doesn't follow her commands. And like, apparently the reason for this is that the Ghost Nation guy speaks Lakota, and Maeve commanded in English, and that language difference is why it didn't work. But then when Maeve goes to Shogun World, she starts speaking Japanese to the Japanese hosts, and then her commands do work. But like, what's the point? What's the point of that confusion over like languages and the control? Like it's like the show wants us to not understand what's going on, which is okay when it's like for a specific narrative purpose or reveal, but much of the stuff that happens, it doesn't work like that. And then we get the Battle of Fort Forlorn Hope, which might be like the lowest stakes battle in television history, because like the viewers do not give a single shit about any of the Confederado soldiers, and we do not give a single shit about these random faceless Delos soldiers. It seems like the showrunners just felt obliged to put a big battle scene in the show at some point, even though it serves no clear narrative purpose and has no dramatic tension, and the effects are boring and lame. Episode 4 is the Riddle of the Sphinx, where we have James Delos trapped in this like Sisyphean cycle of being created then destroyed over and over, and it's a really cool like stylishly shot like visual representation of the horror of this like Delos immortality project. It shows how terrible it would be if we really understood humans, if we codified them, if we put them in a box and prodded them like a fucking frog being dissected. When you put a life under a microscope, it becomes not a life. The symbolism in this episode also has like actual meanings. Like instead of all of the random Jesus imagery that they throw around with Craddock and Peter Abernathy for no reason, all the like circles in this episode, the fish bowls, the hourglasses, are representations of Delos's life trapped in a box. It encourages us to ask, to what extent are we a goldfish in a bowl? To what extent is our life sitting on a treadmill, an exercise bike, round and round? It forces us to question ourselves. It's all pretty cool, but it would be a lot cooler if it actually represented what it thought it represented. This is supposedly a project to achieve human immortality, but apparently what they've actually done is they've made copies, like these like half-host, half-human copies of the original. And that's not the same as immortality. If someone made a copy of you and then you died, you'd be dead, and then the copy would be alive. So I don't know why they keep calling this immortality. If they wanted it to be immortality, they should have like explained it as some like consciousness transfer or something. Like, why didn't they do that? So yeah, William witnesses the Delos Immortality Project over years, and he becomes disillusioned because he sees how the Immortality Project deprives people of their free will. It reduces them into something less than human, and William doesn't want to suffer the same fate. So a lot of his main goal this season is to destroy the Forge, prevent immortality, and escape being put in a loop, which in the end he is. At the end of the episode, we see James Delos's final death. He has these lines about, "I'm all the way down," which is a callback to what Logan told him in his last conversation with his son. I like to think that this breakdown that we're seeing, it's not a failure of the Immortality Project, it's not a faulty host. This is actually what James Delos would have done if he survived. He's distraught and he has a breakdown over the failure of his relationship with his son. We were told that was his cornerstone. So maybe the repeated breakdown of James Delos over and over, it's not a failure of the Immortality Project, it is a success in replicating the failure that James Delos is. Which feeds back into the thesis of Westworld that humans are fundamentally flawed and bad, and therefore, like, not worthy of being made immortal, right? Why preserve failure? Ford would argue that humans are done and hosts are the future, and maybe somewhere deep down, William agrees. Clementine drags Bernard to the cave with Elsie, and we never get an explanation for that. We also get some more baffling Ghost Nation shit. Stubbs says that Ghost Nation keeps the humans close, but they're not killing humans, they're only killing hosts. And like, maybe it makes sense for Ghost Nation to like kill the hosts that they think might be a problem if they're brought to the Sublime. Like, Heaven is like an exclusive club. You don't want to invite everyone, so maybe that's why Ghost Nation kills some hosts. But still, we get zero explanation for why Ghost Nation is capturing humans. humans. Akichita also tells Stubbs that you only live as long as the last person who remembers you, and then releases Stubbs, which is also fucking baffling. And then William is in Las Mudas, and he tries to break out of his bad guy loop, because instead of killing Lawrence and his family, he kills the people who are trying to kill Lawrence and his family, and apparently that's what redemption means in the world of Westworld. It's not a very good representation of human good versus human evil when both options involve indiscriminately killing randos. Half of William's scenes involve him shooting people, so it's not immediately apparent that this particular one is meant to represent William questioning his whole identity and becoming a better person. The show also swings wildly on whether or not William thinks that hosts are people. Throughout season 1, he's it's just a game, killing hosts doesn't matter, it's not real, but he also kills Maeve as explicitly an expression of evil. So where does he stand? Does he believe hosts are conscious or not? At the end of the episode, Emily, William's daughter, turns up, which is meant to be his last big hope at freeing himself from this violent loop, and of course he fucks it up. At the start of episode 5, we see Strand and the humans draining the valley and pulling out all of the hosts that were floating in there, and Antoine pulls out some of their brains and finds that they're not wiped but virgin, as though they held no data, and those are the hosts that had gone into the Sublime. That's why their brains are weird. So the puzzle pieces fit, but what did the time fuckery achieve? In season 1, the non-linear timeline had the specific purpose of seeing things from Dolores' point of view. We experienced her confusion during her journey to consciousness. But the season 2 time fuckery was to conceal what? The fact that Charlotte is actually Dolores? Maybe that would be a cool reveal if Charlotte was any more than a totally one-dimensional character. Or if the revelation that Charlotte was Dolores all along changed our perspective on Dolores. But we already knew that she was ruthless and, was willing to torture Bernard and stuff. So what was the point? Dolores and Teddy go to Sweetwater and they see Clementine meeting the new Clementine, and it's a really beautiful, succinct visual representation of the falsity of hosts, the replaceability of hosts, and therefore the unrealness of hosts. So while Dolores says that she does love Teddy, at least enough to fuck him, she decides that their relationship is not more important than their survival, and so Dolores reprograms Teddy to make him more aggressive and violent and therefore more survivable in the battles to come, which makes sense. Although the whole metaphor with the blue tongue and burning cows and stuff, what the fuck was that? That was the most awkward metaphor. Maeve goes to Shogun World, and there is a lot of lavish detail in this world. The duplicates of Westworld stories and characters is a cool meditation on the fakeness of hosts, and also on similarities across cultures, so there are some interesting ideas being played with through the duplication of Shogun World and Westworld. Maeve gets superpowers. She fully unlocks her ability to control other people and to see into their memories and to make them conscious with her mind. She just has these massively OP catch-all powers like some psychic Jean Grey person. And then she proceeds to not really use them much throughout the season. I mean, she kills a bunch of people with them, but they've been achieving that with guns fine enough for the rest of the series. And at one point she almost wakes Akane to consciousness with her superpower, but she doesn't go through with it, and she never wakes another host. I was really looking forward to her using her superpowers in some interesting ways, to wake whole masses of hosts at once, or to use her powers to understand other people better, given the psychic memory extraction part of it. Why did none of that happen? The power did facilitate her connection with Akichita through her daughter, so there's that, I guess, but the powers just didn't seem utilized in a way that justified their addition. They could have explored the philosophical implications of a power that controls people when Maeve represents freedom. That seems like a really obvious and interesting tension, but they sort of didn't explore it at all. The antagonist in this episode is this evil Shogun guy. He's this malfunctioning host who's crazy and wants to kill people, which is about the most boring possible antagonist imaginable. There are some really interesting characters in this show with distinct opposing philosophical viewpoints, like Maeve, Dolores, Bernard, Akichita, but instead of having these really fascinating characters struggle against each other, they go off on their own paths and fight random nameless hosts with no backstory or motivation, which is completely uninteresting. This episode does have some really beautiful, lush visuals though, and there's something about a geisha dancing to a Japanese rendition of a Wu-Tang Clan song that is pretty dope and something that you couldn't see on many other shows. But Maeve gets a hold of her superpowers, and at the end of the episode she says, "I've found a new voice. I'm gonna use my voice." And then what does she do? She picks up a fucking sword. This show cannot think of any other way for characters to express themselves than violence. William's a bad guy? Shoot cunts. William's trying to be a better guy? Shoot cunts. Maeve wants freedom? Shoot cunts. Dolores wants survival? Shoot cunts. Dolores, Maeve, and William talk as though they have distinct goals and motivations and philosophies, but for 90% of the show, they all do the same thing, which is kill people. Not to mention that one of the whole purposes of season 1 was to show how these dehumanized hosts, these machines, these things, are actually people with stories and needs and desires and feelings of their own. But throughout season 2, there are these masses of slaughtered hosts, these dehumanized, faceless, nameless people who are killed without second thought. The Shogun's men, the Confederados, the humans, all the human guests, they're all killed by protagonists, and we're meant to feel nothing? The show's insatiable need for bloodshed undermines one of the fundamental ideas that defined the previous season: humanizing the dehumanized.